Welcome to Cop to Corporate. I'm Sam T, your podcast host, and this is the podcast where we unpack one of the most challenging career pivots out there, moving from the structured, high stakes world of law enforcement into the fast moving, strategy driven world of business and entrepreneurship. Today's guest is Jen Benjamins, with 22 years of service as a police officer, detective, and supervisor at the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. She's a seasoned instructor in undercover operations, officer wellness, and subcultural criminal behavior. And this is a very unique one. Court certified as an expert in the pimp and prostitution subculture. So I'm excited to talk to you about that, Jen. She also serves as a member and instructor with the International Undercover Police Officers Association and trains on the psychological impacts of undercover work and supervision of specialized units. So, Jen, welcome to Cop to Corporate.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
I am thrilled that you are here. So let's start with at the beginning. So talk to us about what got you into law enforcement, where you started.
So I was born and raised in Vegas, in the very rural part of Vegas. I was never in trouble. I never had, I was never in a police car. I happened to never shot a gun before. I grew up. I went to college, played softball. I came back to go finish up at UNLV. And I just ran into a recruiter and he was like, have you ever thought about being a cop? And at the time I was in the middle of like learning about criminal justice. And what was really the most fascinating thing for me and had my interest was criminal behavior and really the sociology and the psychology of it. So when I met that recruiter, I was like, well, yeah, it may be an option for me. And so I ended up testing and the second time around, I actually did make it. I ended up spending almost 22 years with Las Vegas Metro, and it was the greatest decision I ever did. I really didn't know where I was going to go with criminal justice degree, other than I was really fascinated with criminal behavior. But it was truly like the greatest thing I could have ever done, and I'm so grateful, to have survived those 22 years in it.
Yeah, from when we talked a couple of weeks ago, it sounds like you had quite a fascinating career. And what I hadn't heard before is you kind of jumped straight into the hardcore stuff, right? So you went through police academy, and then what happened right after that?
Well, I managed to make it through field training, and then you manage to graduate to being off probation. And then when you're off probation, the world opens up. You can try new things. You can do ride-alongs. And the day that I knew I was off probation, I said, "Hey, boss, I think I want to try Vice, like working undercover as a prostitute." And he was like, "I happen to know somebody." And I was like, "Great." And then it was the next week, I was scantily clad, dressed and learning about what I was going to do that night. And that was my first experience of working undercover. And after that, I was like, this is the only thing I want to do at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be something that would be so fun and probably a little scary at times too. So you probably experienced a lot of emotions throughout those 22 years, given everything that you did. So what kind of started you moving towards leaving law enforcement? Because 22 years that's a good amount of time to, retire, to figure out what's next, and to also have a full-on career after a law enforcement career. So what kind of got you moving towards leaving?
Yeah, and I'm young. I'm 45. At the time I was 45 years old when I retired. So to me, it was like I have another 45 years at least to live, right? So Uh, the months that led up to me retiring, well, let's back up. We had 2020, right, where we had riots and protests, and not a lot of people knew that in Vegas we had one really bad riot weekend, and we had over 500 protests throughout that year. We also had COVID lockdown, right, and I've been a single mom for as long as my kids were 4 and 2, and so when I came into the last months of me working. I kind of had 3 bad days that were like, I really need to reassess how my life is going, or if I keep doing this the way that I'm operating, I may not have anything left if I were to keep going. And so the 3 bad days was, my dog got cancer. Mom had a stroke the next day, and I had to admit youngest kid into a psychiatric hospital for suicidal tendencies. And I just remember thinking this job has provided me so much, you know, so much of a life, all of that good stuff, but and the money and all these things and the fun and whatever, but like what was mattered most to me was starting to fall apart, or at least at that point I realized it was falling apart. So I chose to retire. It's uh wasn't necessarily the hardest decision for me to make, but it was like my kids were really disconnected from me. And my mom was not doing great, or at least she was starting to fail. So I decided I was going to retire. And at that point, to decide in that single month that you're going to leave something that I only knew since I was 23 years old, I really didn't have a plan B. I didn't have an exit strategy. I didn't have like, okay, once I retire, the next week I go to do some corporate job or some casino job or something like that, or had another plan. I didn't have anything. And so when I first retired, I was like, okay, I'm going to be the greatest stay-at-home mom ever, because that's what my kids never got. And that did not work out as well. And I remember my kid about 4 or 5 months into me retiring, and I'm going to all of her track stuff. I'm going to her practices. I'm at home making dinner. We're doing all this stuff. I'm kind of forcing myself into their lives, which is not what they had for 15 years of that. My oldest came to me and said, like almost like she was breaking up with me, like, you need to get a job, you need to go do something, you need to, we see you too much, we're not used to this. And I was like, okay, yeah, I get it, I need to do something. And that transition was, up until that point, was really not healthy. I was very depressed. I was very like at a felt and loss of purpose, because I had been a hard charger. I was one of those ones who worked longer than I actually got paid. I was the one who would do anything they asked me to do. Even as a supervisor, I'm like, we can do it. I can make it happen. It's possible. And I chased the big arrests and the community that I served, and now I had nothing. And I felt like I wasn't prepared for this transition. And so I was very depressed. I was very at a loss. I thought, the phone stopped ringing. When I retired, I thought, wow, all these friends that I had on the department, they're not calling me anymore. And I remember one day just going through my phone and just sending texts to everyone that was in my phone that was from my work. And if you didn't write me back within a day, I just deleted you. And I was like, okay, where else, where is this showing up in my life, that the relationships that I thought I had, or that, were close to me, were really broken, damaged, or maybe not what I thought they were. So when my kid came to me with that, I was like, you know what, I got to go back and teach. And so I had a training that was going to go on in November. And I had a friend come to me and she said, when I went to your retirement, which I didn't even really want a retirement party, my civilian friends wanted to celebrate my career by me throwing a retirement party. I didn't even want one. And but this friend who was a civilian came and she goes, when I went to your retirement, your light was really dim. Like you had this light when I worked around you, watching you on the job. But now all of a sudden it was gone. And I was like, yeah. I said, I just got to find something to do. And she asked me, what do you want? Like, what's next? What do you want? And I said, well, all that I care about right now is that my kids at 18 don't check out and never come back and see me again, because that's where I saw the relationships. And after talking to several other friends who retired, I would ask them about their relationships, whether their ex-wife, their second ex-wife, their kids, their stepkids, and all that. And they're like, yeah, my kids are too busy for me. Yeah, my kids really don't like me because, I worked all the time and whatever. And I was like, wow, this is a common theme here, that the relationships that we thought were really important, were really broken when we're done with this job, and we don't realize it until we're done. And then we see the light because we have so much more time to kind of focus on that stuff. So I ended up, this friend, I said, I just don't want him to leave me and never come back. And so she introduced me to a emotional intelligence program. It's also called a leadership program. And it really grounded me back to myself, not me being so outward focused on the community and the people I was serving and the job and all this other stuff. It really brought me back to knowing myself again and really being present with the things around me, living for each moment, and appreciating the things that I do have, and making amends with a lot of the relationships that I had in my life that were tarnished, broken, through me putting my job first. Because I'll tell you, a lot of times during when I was working, my kids were probably second and third on the list of priorities in my life. So I really, really worked on those relationships. And then I started putting goals out for myself, which then became my purpose. And that's why I created this new training program where I really want to focus on the knowledge that I have that, when we leave law enforcement, we keep a lot of that stuff to ourselves. All those things, all those like nuances about the job, especially when it comes to undercover work, and we don't share it and we don't create the next generation to be knowledgeable in the things that we did back in the day, right? Some of those things are still relevant today. So I created Covert Blue LLC, and just this summer I was just like, I got to do something. It's not about necessarily, I don't like to say legacy, like creating a legacy, but I want to create something that is mine, that is personal, that I help support the next generation of officers who are still out there, like really fighting the fight in this completely dangerous, just this world right now is so crazy. And I admire every officer who's still in this war that's going on. So I created this because I also wanted to focus on women in undercover operations, which is a very um un maybe I wouldn't say unvalued, but it's very overlooked in the police and undercover world. So I created a what I believe and what I'm manifesting to be the largest women's undercover and investigations training, and it's solely trained by women. So that I've never seen before. And I want to create that because every training I've ever been to in an undercover capacity there was a guy that usually was the leader of the instruction, and there might have been a woman off to the side who was like chiming in once in a while that sometimes, yay or nay, I thought were credible. So, not a flex, but I did a lot of great things right in my career. And when I retired, it's unfair for me to hold it in and not share it with the rest of, these officers that are coming up and doing the job again.
I agree. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing those types of things that happen to you because I know that a lot of people and a lot of law enforcement in general will not share the personal issues that they have going on. We're
Mhm.
taught to compartmentalize, and then that just ends up, you know, exploding or making things really bad. And I know a lot of people who have bad relationships with their kids or their significant others or their friends or families because they're so committed to the job, and sometimes because they bring it home too. So I appreciate you sharing that, and that you knew what was most important to you, that you ended up making it a priority for yourself, even though it meant leaving a career that also meant a lot to you.
Yeah, and I know I told you a little while ago about, like, how really low it gets, and we just had an officer a year ago, commit suicide. There was very similar situation. I'm not gonna say the same because 'cause we're all different, but, that loss of purpose and broken relationships. And when I was at, like, my lowest, after retiring within the first, 6 months before I went to that program, like, I was there. Like, I was like, "My kids hate me. I have no friends and relationships. They're not blowing up my phone because 'cause they're still working and they're still doing their thing, and they're busy with their lives." I had, really the lack of purpose of where I was going. I was drinking heavily just to numb out anything that was, um, that would remind me that I was somebody once. I was a hard charger. I was this sheepdog and protecting this herd of sheep from the wolves, and it got to that point where I was just like, what's the point if I'm not doing what I really signed up for and what gives me purpose and relationships. And what's the point? And that just wasn't, that's not fair. Um, when I worked with the peer support team in Metro, we talked about a lot about suicide. And one of the things that we went through was like, yeah, suicide is for you to get rid of your problems, but the chaos that comes after that, like, they don't have a dad now. They don't have a mom. You weren't set up to die. And what I mean by that is a will and a trust and life insurance and those kind of things aren't set up. You leave behind a lot of people who really do love you, and you don't
Yeah.
see it because you're very just in your shit that you can't see that. And it's hard to come out of that. And I thank my friend all the time for taking me to this program, because I really think it did save my life at that point, and gave me new direction in relationships and purpose.
So you knew your purpose when you were in law enforcement, and I think that a lot of cops can say that too. So after leaving law enforcement, what would you have done differently to make your transition a little bit easier for you, already having known deep inside what you were meant for?
Yeah, man. Like, I always tell people this all the time about like the shoulda, woulda, couldas, right? Or as my Latin instructor, the shoulda, the couldas, and the wouldas. If we had all those things, right? If we shoulda, coulda, woulda thought about all these things, I wouldn't be here right now.
Of
Right? I
course.
wouldn't have the things that I wouldn't have the mindset. I wouldn't have had that shift in perspective of what's going on. So I had to go through all of those things. And yeah, it was really crappy. And I think one of the things that Metro is trying to do now is really sit down with families when these officers are in the academy and saying, look, this is what may go on, and please watch for this stuff, and we're here for you as well. So they're incorporating a lot of the family into the career of these people who decide to choose this job, because I mean it is still a rough job. You're getting yelled at all the time. You're there to solve everybody's problems, and you're not doing right for them and all this other stuff, and then you see the ugliest things. I think if I went back and started over again, I would really focus on when I check out, check off, I need to be able to check off and check out. Like, I'm check out of work and then come home and be present and really incorporate my second job, which was being a mom, right? I would be like, I would avoid, there was times where I saw my kids from 8 a.m. to 8:45 a.m. and I worked deep undercover 5, 6 days out of the week. And I didn't see my kids, but I thought that was okay because they seemed okay. But really, they weren't. I wasn't doing a lot of checking in with, what do you need from me outside of the money and the house and the things that I'm providing? And really, to relationship with the people in your life, stay grounded, take more vacations, like really check out when you need to check out more often. There were times where I didn't even know I was burning vacation every December, like literally giving it back to the department, because I didn't know that vacation burnt like that. I didn't know I was wasting money and time, and I just didn't live like that. And so my greatest advice would be to just really stay grounded in who you are and who you bring into this job, like your family and your friends, and really check out when you need to and focus on those things. Because at the end of the day, Metro's not going to build a statue of you outside because all the great work that you did. And you can get a bunch of awards, but really nothing matters, because at 45, I have 2 kids, now at 48, that love me, that I know will wipe my ass when when get to that point, because I've shifted how our relationship is. And it's never too late, but go back and start that in the beginning so you have those people at the end.
Yeah, I think that having a life outside of your career is really important, not just being able to check out once you get home, but having other hobbies that you do, or volunteering, or something that will pull you out, because we know that when you're a cop, most of your friends are police officers, and when that's the case, most of the time that's what you're talking about when you're with them. And so it really just takes over your whole world. So having something that you can do outside of law enforcement, literally outside of law enforcement, that can make your life better or make someone else's life better is really important too.
Yeah, exactly. Hobbies are the best, especially when when I did start getting my mind right and shifted, like I picked up a ton of new friends, especially from this program, who are like-minded people, different jobs, different things that I would try. I mean, I'll try anything, everybody asks me to do something. I'm like, yeah, I'll try it once. And just hobbies around my property and my animals and things like that. Like, I'm not so I just remember being so focused on the community and the work and bad guys that I didn't stop to smell the roses. I mean, in that real big sense of the word, right? Like, everything is so much clearer. Even the clouds, the trees, everything is just more open because I've allowed my mind to just be more free of being that identity as a cop, and that's all I was doing. That's all I was ever good at. But I'm really good at a lot of other things.
That's beautiful. So you are a prime example of harnessing the skills that you got from law enforcement into your career after. So in a general sense, how does one do that once they decide to leave?
Yeah. So wh- when when you have a specialty, right? Like, mine's a great specialty. There's not a lot of people that work undercover. In my opinion, and maybe it's also the opinion of many other undercovers around the world, is about 1% of law enforcement can do undercover work. And I've proven this several times in the different trainings that I've had. Is I can teach, I especially like women, I can teach a class of 40 women, 3 by the end of the week after they've seen everything, heard everything. 3 will say, "I'll try it." 1 will be good at it. So it's a very small, like, niche of people. I mean, think about this, like, if law enforcement 13% of law enforcement are women, I'm now shrinking that down even more. That doesn't mean they can't take my training and learn about investigations and learn about drugs and sex trafficking and things like that, because we need all of those people to make undercover operations work. So, yeah, it's something that's different. It's something when it comes from a woman as well. And the job that I have to almost prove who I am and what I've done. That's the thing about being a woman and then transitioning and then going to teach. And I'll tell you, it's not it can be hard because, 1, we're 13% of the population. 2, I have to prove, unlike some other males in a certain role or field or genre of policing, I have to prove that I can do this job. And especially when it comes to undercover, I had a guy DM me one time. He's like, "I checked on you. You're the real deal." And I was like, "Thanks." Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you, but I have to post. I have to go on podcasts and things like that. I have to show pictures of what I did and explain the stories that I do to be legitimate in a way. And that's not something outside of the job. That's what I had to do in the job, right? Like, when you're a female cop, you really have to prove yourself almost on a daily basis up until you retire. I mean, in any position that you go through, whether it's, you're just a patrol officer to a detective to becoming a supervisor. Now that's a whole other level of competency you have to prove. So when I retired and I continued to train, and then I created this business, and I'm like, "Hey, this is a business I can do. I can sustain it because this is what I know." It's a lot of, um, really, like, just proving to people that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know that coming from law enforcement, you learn stuff like crisis management, like teamwork, all those soft skills that you have as a cop, you can bring into the next world. And as an entrepreneur, you are teaching people about all the stuff that you learned as a cop. So if you're talking to another cop who wants to get out and spread their wings and be an entrepreneur, what are you telling them about creating a business or about the skills that they had? What skills transfer for them?
Yeah, so a lot of skills can transfer. There could be something like, for instance, like 1 October. If you're familiar with 1 October in Las Vegas, it was the big shooting that happened at Mandalay Bay. There's quite a few cops that I know that made a PowerPoint, made a lesson specifically for that, and that's all they teach. And that's great. They were there, they did the investigation, they did the everything that was encompassing of that, and a you can make a living off of that. Or like, let's say you came from narcotics or you came from robbery or sexual assaults, even a great one is all of those skills that you earned and you learned while you were on the job. You then translate that into a lesson plan, a PowerPoint, pictures, like you have graphs, you have some statistics and things like that. You can create your own business from that. What my business is doing is one, I'm promoting other people's business, other people's lessons. So if you have something and I believe in your company, let's say you had like a resiliency training. I vet you. I go, yes, you're the real deal. This is great information. I'm going to put you on my website so you can get offers and asked to speak at different conferences and things like that. My company also, if we can combine our resources, I set up all the training and we go somewhere and that to another jurisdiction that's hosting, and then we'll put on the training there. So the way that my mind works after working for somebody for a long time is, look, there's plenty of information to go around, and there's plenty of jurisdictions that would love to have host trainings, and they want specific training. They want undercover operation. They want sexual assault. They want those things, and they want them taught by somebody else and bring it forward. When you create your own business, it's a little bit of work. It's getting all the licensing and all that other stuff. But then it's also putting you out there to 18,000 police departments in America and international. Cause I've even gone to Jamaica, England, Scotland, Ghana. Like, I've put all these things out there so they know that I exist. And then now they can research what kind of training I have, when I'm going to have them, and then invite me out to where they're doing trainings. And then I bring my company to them.
So it sounds like courage from job also has to transfer over into being an entrepreneur too.
Yes, you cannot take this job personally if they don't want you. If you're not that specific subject that they want to hear about, it's okay. You just find somebody else that wants to hear about you, what you have to offer.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm a 20-year cop. I'm looking into retiring. I'm looking into leaving. I have no idea what I want to do next. What are your top 3 pieces of advice that you can give to someone in that situation?
Top three. For one, have a purpose. Like, what is your next purpose? Some people retire and they just don't want to do cop stuff anymore. They don't want to do security. But find something. Find a hobby, whether it's traveling. It could be traveling. A lot of people buy a Class C RV and then they just travel for a little while. For sure, find something to do that will occupy your time, because that lack of going to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, well, it's the clock ticks. You literally can hear it tick, tick, tick as you go, because you're going to be like, wow, that clock is really loud because I've never heard it before. Time went fast. Stay in shape or get in shape. I'm about to post on LinkedIn about how, I would say, fat might not have been the word, but how keeping in shape was one of my probably number 3, 4 things to do on my priority list, was to stay in shape, be healthy, eat right, especially when we had COVID and what I call riot season. Man, people would bring food to the station and I was like 170 pounds at 5'6". Not cute. But when we retire, we also subject ourselves to heart issues, right? Because now that we're not in the job, we have high cortisol, we got belly fat, we're not in shape anymore. And now that's where we're susceptible the first 5 years of having that heart attack. So when you retire, before you retire, even one of the biggest things that I tell women when they say, what's the biggest advice? Be in shape, stay in shape. And so when you retire, get on some regimen, whether it's start walking, start taking care of yourself. You have time now. Start taking care of yourself. Get that heart screen, that calcium score, see where you're at, and then start really improving your health. And then the third thing I would say is start mending those relationships. Start reaching out to the people that you haven't reached out to, that you've neglected because of the job, especially those kids and even ex-wives. Like, one of the things that I even did with an ex was to make amends with an ex. Like, sorry, I thought I was doing right back then while I was on the job. I thought that was what we were supposed to do, and that wasn't. And so I take responsibility for how I was back then and put it back in their core, make amends with them. And then you can build a relationship or just be clear of that responsibility that you took for that relationship, but really go back and build those relationships that the job had affected.
That's really great advice, all three of them, because I think that all three just really they hit deep into, you know, the intersection of your personal life and your professional life. And you could argue that all of that stuff you should be doing before you're even thinking about retiring too, if you are able to manage that. So, Jen, thank you so much. Where can our viewers find you?
Yeah, so you can find Covert Blue LLC.com, and that'll be all my training. You can also find other podcasts, you can find other articles and things like that. You can find all of my trainings on there. I am on Instagram, not so active there, but I am very active on LinkedIn because that's where my peoples are. So you can also find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, just reach out. And if anybody has any questions, especially the rough transition that I had, man, I'm here for everybody. And my phone is on all the time. If anybody needed any questions or like how to, or man, you need to get a job in Las Vegas. I know every security
You know, people.
person. I know people. It's a great place to retire. We don't have state income, so a lot of people come out here and retire, and we can find you a job if you're retiring from law enforcement, and a good job, not just like that security, bearline based security too.
Jen's got your back.
I do.
Thank you so much for coming on to Cop to Corporate, Jen.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this because this is a really good topic, good way to get us out there and talking. So vulnerability is a superpower. And the more you can be vulnerable and get this out, the more others will step up and find a change in themselves.
Thank you.
This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.